Coming to you today from my garden. It's gorgeous and full of life. Because I kind of want to circle back to what I was talking about the other day about how we all follow this plan, and this plan seems to include the house with the lawn and all that. Now, what if you already have the house and the lawn and you're just kind of killing yourself trying to keep that stupid lawn alive? You're out there pulling weeds and spreading fertilizer and spraying herbicides to kill the dandelions, and then probably paying somebody to come in and rototill your, or not rototill, aerate your yard. It's where they have the little machine that picks out the little plugs of dirt and leaves them behind looking like poop all over the place. That's so you can get air to the roots of your grass, because grass tends to grow in a flat, tight mat of roots that water has a hard time sinking through. A lot of it just runs right off because it can't get through the roots, especially if you're in Regina and underneath is all clay. It's really hard to get water through the clay. Got lots of houses around here with flooding issues, actually. When it rains a lot, it just runs off of the clay and into your house. It doesn't sink down into the ground. And if you're somewhere downhill, like in downtown under the underpasses, it floods. Like, not every time it rains, but a lot of the time when it rains, it floods the underpasses and people lose their cars because it flooded so much. Now, why does it flood like that? Because you're in a cement landscape where no water can sink into the ground, and yeah, they've graded it all so that it all runs to a particular point, and they've got storm drains for it to sink down into, but is it enough? No, because we're still flooding the underpasses and people are still losing their vehicles. And, you know, at the end of the day, we still have to pay to bring all that water back to our yards to water the lawns that we're trying to keep alive while sending all of the water away from our house. Maybe we're not thinking about this the right way. We've been really focused on shunting water away from the house so it doesn't go into the house, which makes sense. But what if we approached it in a different way? What if it didn't have to be a hard pan that shunted the water elsewhere for us to buy back? What if we could sink that water on our land? What if it hit the ground in our yards and it stayed there and it fed us? What if it didn't take any work to keep it going like that? What if it was easy? Everybody talks to me about how hard gardening is. They look at my yard and it's my whole front yard. My whole front yard is garden. And people are like, oh my God, you must spend all your time out there. Like, it's so much work. And how do you keep up with it all? How do you have kids and you keep up with this garden? I can't imagine. And the answer is, I thought about it a lot, about how to solve the problems that I had. Like, I didn't want to be out here 6 hours a day watering. This is the first year where I haven't really had to water at all, and it's by design. I didn't get lucky. Yes, it's rained a lot, but it's almost too wet in here because it holds all the rain. Like, my butt's getting wet while I sit on the path, because my path is, let's see it, it's all mulch and it's all really wet, even though it's been a few days since it rained and it's really hot. It's really hot right now. I'm probably shiny. But what if we could turn that space in the front of our houses that we typically spend hours watering and fertilizing and aerating and cutting and weeding, and my neighbors with lawns spend way more time outside working on their yards than I do. Way more. And mine is feeding me, and it's feeding my friends, and it's feeding my family, and it could probably feed half of the neighborhood if anybody talked to each other or came and talked to me while I'm outside in it. And if I'm outside in the garden, it's because I want to be, because it's nice outside, because it's nice in here where there's food and there's flowers and there's bugs buzzing around. And I think we're missing a lot of nature with our grass. And we talk a lot about how, with environmental issues and stuff, how you can't feed the world with home gardens, and it just kind of blows my mind that people actually believe that. What if we got an entire neighborhood to throw in a yard like this? What if we all helped each other do it? What if we had crowdfunding campaigns that paid for the plants so people didn't have to worry about not having the money to feed themselves good food? Because the cheapest food in the grocery store, it's not really food. It's not. Even if you're buying vegetables, they were picked months before, well, maybe not months, they were picked weeks before they were ready to eat, before they had taken in all of those nutrients that you need. They're usually produced in monoculture practices. And the problem with that is that each type of plant draws specific nutrients. And if you only have one type of plant, it's drawing all the nutrients and there's nothing else to put those nutrients back in. So we wind up turning to these chemical fertilizers made in a lab that you had to buy. Somebody's convinced you have to buy this thing to keep your food growing because you're doing it in a way that isn't really sustainable. It's not sustainable. If it's taking the nutrients and putting nothing back, it's not sustainable. It's going to collapse. Unless you keep putting your chemicals in, but still. There's an ad that keeps popping up and stopping my videos, and I really like to get rid of it. Who makes those ads that just pop up on your phone randomly? I didn't even download anything. Get lost. What was I talking about? Supporting our food needs with chemical fertilizers. What if we tried something different? That's like we like to think it's working really well, but if you look at the rates of deforestation to plant crops, and yes, people will pipe up and say those crops are to feed livestock, and yeah, our livestock practices are pretty heinous too, but they can be managed differently too, in a way that is sustainable without everybody stopping eating meat. It doesn't have to be that way, and in some locations it's really not feasible to live only off of vegetables. If vegetables don't grow where you are, it's not sustainable to truck them in from California, which is burning most years, by the way. So what if instead we banded together and learned how to make systems that work to support themselves, where all you have to do is go in and harvest. You plant it at the beginning of the year and you go in and you harvest as it's ready, and that's all you have to do. What if gardening was that easy? This garden's that easy. I'll chop it all down at the end of the summer and probably leave it laying right where it is. And all of my lettuces and my spinach and my chard and all of that, it'll all break down into its component nutrients and it will feed next year's crop. And that's not all I put into it. I can go into greater depth with that, but I think this is going to be a really long video if I do that. That will probably come later. What if we did this? What if we grouped together, played off of each other's knowledge about how this stuff works, and actually got to know the people around us and helped each other put systems that stop the flooding in our houses, that put nutrients back into our soil, that naturally aerate the soil so we don't have to use machines that run off gas or electricity to do it. We're putting so much more effort into these systems that don't feed us than we are into the systems that do. Most people don't have to think about where their food comes from, and that's allowed people to do a lot of questionable things with our food that you should probably really look into, because this is how you're feeding your body. And if you're sick and tired all the time, maybe it's because you're not thinking much about your food and where it comes from and how it's grown and what nutrients there actually are in it. Because if it's being grown on depleted land and picked way early and sprayed with preservatives so that it makes it to you without dying, or well, not dying, without rotting, how good for you is it? And why does it seem like less work to be sick and tired from your food choices than to pick up a book and learn about gardening? Go online and learn about gardening. You know what a great resource is? Verge Permaculture. I'll put a link somewhere. Verge Permaculture. They're working on the prairies. They're in Calgary. It's an urban farm. But I think that's what we need. I think that's how we're going to feed people. Like, people need to get back to gardening. If you had food in your front yards, we could all grow different things and gather what we grow and trade. And you would have so much abundance and so much diversity in what you get to eat. You'd be eating foods you've never seen before, and maybe that's a little bit scary, but maybe we're being fed nutrient-void diets and should do the scary thing and change. Do you want to hear more about it? Subscribe, leave a comment, let me know. Neighbors out blowing leaves around. Look at all the tomatoes. This is right along a city sidewalk. And are there problems with pests? Sometimes. It's not the end of the world. There's lots here, still.